We're back out here once again, and today we're talking about something a lot of you guys have been asking me about, and that is, when I go out to the water, how is it that I'm selecting the bait choices that I'm selecting, and why I have such confidence that they'll work. Stick around, we're going to talk all about it. Got it. Ooh, that's another good one. I'm telling you, they're stacked up over there, honey. This is a big one. Holy cow, look at the size of this one. Look at this one. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And as I've talked about before on this channel, when it comes to bass fishing, I do have a process that I use. I check Google Earth and I check the weather before I head out to the lake, usually the night before. And especially the weather, and especially if it's a body of water that I'm not super familiar with. But I want to know, what's that weather going to be like? Is it going to be super windy like it is right now? Or is it going to be more calm? Is there going to be sun? What's the temperature going to be? And not only in that day, but the past few days. What has it been like beforehand? Because that matters. Let's say we've had a week of a lot of wind, a lot of rain. Well, that means that the water is going to be stained and there's going to be some current. Plus, it also means that there may not be a lot of anglers out on the water. There may have been a lapse in that pressure to give those bass a chance to recharge, because not a lot of people are going to be out there during the rain. Die-harders such as myself and a few other guys will be, but for the most part, your pleasure boaters, your swimmers, and guys like that are not going to be on the water. So those are important things to take into consideration. But when I'm actually out on the water, when I've got what I want to get, when I've got my tackle boxes and I've got my rods for the day, when I'm out on the water, how is it that I end up with the rods and reels and the baits that I'm going to use for most of the day? Because when I get out there, I'll be honest, usually it's only 1 or 2 rods and reels that I have in my hand all day. Once I settle on those presentations, once I've locked in on those presentations, I rarely change it. Because if I'm using those presentations, then that means I figured out what the fish want, I figured out where the fish are, and I figured out what's working. And it's really not that hard. One of the easiest things that I can do is I let the bass tell me. Now, I know that sounds like a cop-out. You hear it on every single fishing channel, don't you? We talk about bass patterns, we talk about bass behaviors, but it really does hold true. Whenever I get out to the water, one of the first things that I'm going to be using, obviously, is a jerkbait, right? I've talked about that before. It's one of the quickest ways I can think of to get a bass in the boat, but it's also a key to that puzzle. It's a puzzle piece, and it helps me figure out how things are going to go for the rest of the day. If I get a bite on it real quick, if it's a dink, if it's a giant, well, that tells me, well, first of all, the fish are in that area. I know the fish are in that area, and I know that there's some activity. Now, if it's windy, if I've got a lot of wind, I probably may not start immediately with a jerkbait, but if we've got some cloud, we've got some sun, it really doesn't matter. But if we've got a little bit of wind on the water, we've got some chop going on the water, I will probably pick up a jerkbait first and foremost. And it's basically, hey, how are you guys feeling today? And they'll show me. Now, another bait that I use whenever I'm putting the pieces of the puzzle together is topwater, especially a walking bait like this Yo-Zuri or a Head and Spook. I can cover water pretty quickly. I can adjust how I'm doing it, whether I'm working it faster, whether I'm working it slower. And again, if I get bites, I look to see what type of bites am I getting. A lot of times I'll get something slapping at it, and that'll be it. But I let that tell me. I let that be information to let me know just exactly what type of mood that they're in. And even before I pick up topwater, even before I have topwater tied on, I'll look and see what those bass are doing. If I'm seeing bass busting up, but individually, right? You see a bass bust. I don't really feel like that's the best topwater situation. Now, if I have a topwater rod tied on, I will generally throw it in that direction. But most of the time, a jerkbait or a soft plastic jerkbait will do great. A Waco rig does great. I get more bass doing that because that bass wasn't chasing a bait ball. He was chasing an individual fish or saw something on the surface like a bug or something like that and was busting on that one thing. If I see, the bait rolling over the top of the surface and I see multiple bass chasing behind them, that's when you know the topwater deal is completely 100% on, and I can lock that topwater rod in my hand for the rest of the day on most days. But like I said, I get out to the lake, I'm going to start with something like a jerkbait, or I'm going to start with something like topwater, depending upon the conditions. If I've got a little bit of wind, I got a little bit of cloud cover, I got something like that, then a jerkbait. Or if I'm fishing pretty shallow that day, then I'll start with topwater. If I'm fishing a little bit deeper, then I'll generally start with the jerkbait. Wind carried mine right there. I was actually trying to go straight at the bank. Let me turn the boat. Oops. Let a little bit of more line out. Got him. Ooh, that's another good one. I'm telling you, they're stacked up over there, honey. This is a big one. Holy cow, look at the size of this one. Look at this one. Nicest one all day. This one's pushing 3 pounds. No, you're not doing that. You can do it pretty close. There's a nice bass right there. Pushing about 2 1/4. Right at about 2 1/4 pounds. Beautiful, lovely. Thank you, buddy. And there we go. Now, if I get out to the lake and I'm seeing a lot of current, there's a lot of wind, it doesn't really matter if it's sunny or not, but I see a lot of wind, I see pretty good current, that's when I'm really going to be breaking out the moving baits. And something like a square bill can be absolute gold. You've heard me talk about square bills whenever the fishery is pressured, the ones that don't have a lot of rattles to them or that run fairly silently. But another time that a square bill can be just pure money is as a search bait. And you can use these to cover water quickly, and you can ascertain fairly quickly what type of mood those bass are in. You put those pieces of the puzzle together. It's very simple. Now, you can do this from the bank. You don't necessarily need to have something like a square bill, something like a chatterbait to work, something like a spinnerbait to work, something that's going to be moving under the water, especially when you've got a lot of wind, something like a Keitech swim bait, something like that, something you can alternate the speed, something you can make it change direction, because changes of direction are very, very important. If you can get those bass to hit it on the pause, or whether they're hitting it whenever you're burning it, burn it and stop it, burn it and stop it. Putting all that together tells you if you're in the right direction. But if you're seeing activity, you're seeing those bass, you see them bust up, you see bluegill, you see all the other fish in that area, but you're still not getting any bites, well, then it's time to change up and go the other way, especially based on the pressure, right? Something like a Waco rig. That's when I will break this out. I'll say, okay, well, maybe these fish are pressured, they might be active, but they don't really feel like chasing my baits today. Let's slow things down. Now, contrary to popular belief, old lowbrow doesn't hit the water dragging a worm. I do sometimes, but most of the time, I'm actually well into the day before I switch to something like this, after I've already determined what mood those bass are in and how best to approach them. So if I feel that they're in a little bit faster mood, again, we'll go with a square bill, we'll go with a jerkbait, and I can use those to catch multiple bass. But if I feel like they've slowed down, I feel like they're not really in that mood to chase bait, if they're feeling a little bit pressured or if they're feeling a little bit more sluggish, that's when I'm going to something that's got a little bit more finesse. A Waco rig, a wacky rig, a Texas rig worm, a drop shot is great for that. A Ned rig is another great selection. But those are the things that I'm doing whenever I know those bass don't necessarily want to chase bait. They want something slower. They want something right in their face. Now, that doesn't mean that those bass still won't trigger monster strikes, because I went out to the lake yesterday and it was a weekend. There were a lot of people on the water. It was a beautiful day. It was temperate. It wasn't too hot. There was a mild, maybe 5-7 mile an hour wind blowing and just a little bit of current. So you're saying to yourself, okay, that's the perfect day for fishing. That's when I can break out the baits. And I did. But again, chatterbait, square bill, I was not really doing a lot, but I could see those bass were active. I could see that they were busting on bait, but they weren't so much busting on bait balls as much as smaller fish that they were chasing. Well, the jerkbait then came into play, and I was able to find a really nice active school of fish that really did well. I caught about 3 fish out of that, including a very nice one that was about 2.25 pounder. Was very happy with that. But once that bite died off, well, then I picked up this rod and went to work with the Waco rig, and I ended up catching 5 more fish out of that same school. So that's how I know what's going to work and when it's going to work. I let those bass tell me. Now, I'm not emptying my tackle box. Don't get me wrong. I'm not emptying my tackle box. I'm covering water with purpose. I'm moving with determination. If something's not working, I'm changing it out. I'm looking for those bass to explain to me just exactly what they look for. If it doesn't work within 5 or 10 minutes, then I change something out. If I see bass in that area and I know that they're active and I can't get them to bite, then I will trade another bait. Maybe slow things down, maybe speed things up. But I will change to do something. I'm not going to stay there and try to work that same stretch of water for an hour and a half trying to catch one active fish. If I can't get something going in a few minutes, I'll either change water or I will change baits. And if I still can't get something going after changing baits, then I'm just going to move on. That's another piece of the puzzle. Sometimes the bass are just not going to bite what you have regardless. And I'm looking for those active bass, those biting bass. So I'm ready to move on, Even if I'm seeing activity, well, if they're not biting, they're not biting. It's time to move on. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. You let those bass tell you what they want. Start out nice and slow, start out nice and easy. Find some baits that work for you. For me, it's a jerkbait, it's a square bill, and it's topwater. I like to have those presentations because those allow me to cover water, and they're different enough that I can get a clue on what the bass are doing. 9 times out of 10, I will have an answer for everything that I need for the rest of that day in about an hour. And after that, then I can just fine tune and go from there. And if I have to switch baits out and go to something more finesse, that's generally after I've already had success doing something else and I'm trying to catch a few more fish out of one particular school. And I'm telling you, this type of fishing, this is what the pros do. This is the way that they do it, and this is how they use it to cash checks. Give it a try and see if it really doesn't elevate your fishing game. So there you have it. My technique for unraveling the puzzle and the mystery of what those bass want every single time I head out to the water. You give those bass a chance and they will tell you what it is they're looking for, even if they're looking to be left alone and if you should move on. Once you figure out that technique, you will see a drastic increase in the number of bites that you can get, even if you don't have any electronics. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.